So I really do hope you enjoyed that because I certainly did. But I'm going to be covering a little bit more of the defensive side this week. There's going to be some offensive stuff in here as well, talking about how to get around some Cisco stuff, which is called Sticky Macs. But I'll be continuing and talking about that as well. And then towards the end of the presentation, if you want me to go over any of the stuff that we have covered in previous sessions from last term, I can do that as well. But again, what you are going to be seeing is for educational purposes only. Please don't do any of this stuff that isn't on one of your own machines, virtual environments, or home labs. For all of that kind of stuff, you can just run virtual machines on your current machine. So, as I say, how are we going to be stopping unauthorized access to devices on a network? How are we going to be stopping unauthorized access to networks? How to detect some of these devices, how to bypass the prevention methods that companies put in place. And then at the very, very end, if you do want to, I can cover how to install Kali and that kind of stuff. So network security is quite a massively broad topic. Primarily, we as cyber defenders are going to be looking at how to detect and prevent unauthorized access. So whether this be someone who comes into the network like Cosmin just did, which technically has a box on the network, so that we can prevent someone being able to hack into our other machines, our servers, or other things. So this is just going to be primarily how to prevent someone getting an IP on the network in the first place. Quite often, hackers will just walk into the building and plug something in if they are doing a physical pen test, or if they are doing a online pen test, they will try and connect from the web server side. Or if you have guest Wi-Fi, they will also be connecting that way. The reason that we want to protect our stuff is because if they manage to get onto our network, you might not even have to fully hack a box. You could just have file shares open, which contain sensitive information. I've just realized I've got 2 commas there. But yeah, that can contain sensitive information, payroll, or just files with passwords on, because quite a lot of people just have passwords for all of their servers in one place, so that IT staff can manage them. So network access control can be extremely granular. So that means that you can have just a general permission that says, okay, you're only allowed to access things if you plug into this one port, or you can say, okay, what machine is it? What user is it? If they are both matching a certain access list, you allow them access to specific files. So this is done all the time in the office. It has to be a networked machine that is on a certain VLAN, and the user has to have permission. So we've all been using Linux now for a little while, I'd hope, though. We're on about sort of like file permissions. So in that video from Cosmin, you saw that there was some stuff where he had to add +X to a file. So what that means is the file system in Linux was making it an executable file. You also have read and write permissions as well. So here we have on Alice, who has read and write permissions, or 600. If she had execute permissions as well, it would be 700. And Bob has just got read permission, so he's only 400. So you can do this to SMB shares, NTFS, so the Linux sort of like file shares as well. Sorry, my voice is going a bit. I'm a bit under the weather. And you can prevent people from even gaining IPs by using certain network controls. So if they don't have an IP, they physically can't log onto the network. So first of all, we're going to be talking a little bit about what a MAC is, so that you can understand what sticky MACs are and MAC addresses, and some of the stuff that we're going to be working on. So this is just a quick extract from one of my MAC tables. So on the left, you have what VLAN it's running on. Then you have your MAC address. Then you have your whether it's a dynamic or statically assigned one, and then what port it's running on. So I'm just going to be talking about this from a Cisco perspective, because that's what you're using at uni. And then on the bottom is what is called an ARP table, which is an IP to MAC address lookup. So MAC addresses are technically considered the serial numbers of your interfaces, or your Ethernet ports, or your Wi-Fi's MAC address. They're supposed to be semi-unchangeable, but as time has gone on, you are able to change these, and I'm going to be showing you some methods of doing that later. So all it is basically a relation to what your machine is to the IP address. So how do we prevent users gaining IPs? So most of the time, you're going to have a Wi-Fi password on. That's the first step that I would hope all of you have. Or you have network ports that are inaccessible from outside of your house. You don't put a network jack on the very outside of your house because otherwise, or your office, because otherwise someone walks in, starts stealing your Wi-Fi, your bandwidth. So that is a way of preventing users gaining IPs. So if they can't gain access to the network, they can't start hacking anything, they can't start browsing through your file shares, all those kinds of things. MAC address locking. So if you go back to the previous slide, you can see that it's saying what port things are on. So we'll take the top one here. So this top one is on gigabit port 1. If something, let's say, changes to gigabit port 2, or that MAC address is no longer on gigabit port 1, you can set up a sticky MAC, so which means, okay, you physically can't plug anything into this port that isn't this MAC address. Or you can send it to firing off an alert. So instead of just straight up banning the person, you can say, oh, keep the top 3 MAC addresses or the top 4 MAC addresses. And upon reboot of the Cisco switch, all of these are cleared. So that's what a sticky MAC is sort of like limiting the amount of MAC addresses that a table can hold. There are ways around this. So sticky MACs are not as widely used as they should be because they can be quite complex and quite labor intensive to set up and administer and use. So let's take your average office environment that has, let's say, 50 users. If all of a sudden one of their laptops breaks down or their PC breaks down, you go in, you replace it, you'll have to go into the switch, manually say, okay, clear the sticky port address, and then allow them to connect back to the network. Otherwise, when they plug it in, switch it on, it's not going to match the stuff in the table, so therefore it won't be able to do anything. So they are really labor intensive and primarily designed for servers and networks that don't change very often. But if you do get one of these alerts, it can't be the end of the world. Sometimes it allows you to even go down and catch whoever it is, because you get an alert saying, oh, someone's tried to change 4 MAC addresses in the last hour, and you go down and there's some guy sat there who is doing a pen test and is sat there trying to purposely change MAC addresses and doesn't understand why you can't access things. And that's because you on the security side has seen it and gone, okay, we'll wander down and see who's there. They are an incredibly useful tool, but they can be overwritten with stuff like MAC changing. So if you have a Kali machine, you have it installed by default. You need root access, though, is the only thing. So if you are like on one of those boxes that you rent by hour or something, you don't have full root access, this won't work. And all you need to do is know some very basic Linux commands. So Mac Changer has some incredibly good and varied stuff that it can do. So most of the time you are wanting to randomly change your MAC address. So if you're in Starbucks Wi-Fi or whatever and you just want to change it so people can't track what you're doing, along with VPNs and stuff like that, you can change your MAC address. Again, this is only for educational purposes. So in my environment, I'm using it for trying to make sure that I can check if intrusion prevention and detection systems are working, because they are tracking my MAC address. So if I change my MAC address, I want to see if they can pick it up. So that's what I'm using it for in the home lab environment. They can and cannot be useful in this manner. So another thing that you can do when setting up a sticky MAC address and stuff is have a prefix. So let's say everything that starts with E6 you want to allow on your network. You can set that. It's quite complicated, but you can set it. So therefore, if you image all of your machines with Mac Changer or something, so that they all start with E6, you've cut down on the amount of time your admins take, but it's really useful because then it means if someone comes in with their own home machine that starts with BA or some random other thing, it changes the MAC address or alerts you or sends an email or blocks them. So there's an incredible list here, which has every single corporation sort of like MAC address assignment, because every company that makes uh, Ethernet cards, or well, not every company, but all the large companies that makes Ethernet cards or these Wi-Fi adapters or switches and stuff like that, they have their own specific code so that MAC addresses hopefully won't be replicated. So here you can go down the list and say, oh, if I am unplugging a certain device, if I'm doing a pen test, okay, they've got a HP printer plugged into it. Okay, I'll go down the list, find a HP printer, whatever their specific MAC address is or their prefix is, and plug it into Mac Changer and see if I can get it that way. Or if you know the exact make and model of a laptop, you can set your IP to that before you even enter the building. So that, again, you're trying to trick these automated sticky ports and stuff. Sorry about that. So, sorry, I'm going to cough again. I'll just mute myself for a second. Sorry about that. So, I was saying that if we know that the machine we're unplugging, we can see if we can figure out what MAC address it is putting out, and then just set our own MAC address to the MAC address of the device that we just unplugged. So you can get little devices, USB devices that you can plug in. It'll say, hey, what's your MAC address? It'll give you it, and you can say, okay, MAC changer, set it to an exact MAC change. So all you've got to do is be able to figure out what device you want to change it to. So if you've got multiple Ethernet cards like I do, I've got wireless and LAN, I have to specify. So whether that be WLAN port, all you've got to do is change it to, okay, MAC changer M to specific WLAN, which is wireless LAN, or Ethernet, which is whichever one you prefer. And you can set these independently or leave them as default. You can still be detected if you are doing some kind of engagement, though. So there is no foolproof method to getting by on a pen test or something like that. You can still be detected. So if all of a sudden they are looking at their network logs or something, and all of a sudden they see a Linux machine where a Windows machine used to be using Nmap or a vulnerability scanner or something, or they find a machine that has all of a sudden 1,000 ports open, they might have a little bit of a look at it. Or if all of a sudden you're putting out a lot of noisy traffic and they've got an intrusion prevention system or detection system, they can say, hey, okay, we'll go and look at where that machine is, what it does, or they can limit their IP ranges. So this can be got around quite easily with a static IP address, but it can also be quite difficult if you don't know what the IP address of the machine that you just took out was. Again, little hardware device or something can be quite useful for this kind of stuff. If you are trying to stop, they do get on your network, how can you stop them accessing private information? So I'll always go back to sort of like an engagement and test I did, which was the reception PC. It had full access to everything on the network for some reason. Don't know why, but it did. All you've got to do is restrict them from having access to everything to just own little VLANs. You've been doing networking now for a little bit, and you'll continue to do it next year. VLANs are incredibly easy to implement, and you can stop them having access to different file structures or different machines using access control lists. Allowing them access to only what they need, or even just putting a password on the share that holds all of your company data. Creating user accounts, radius servers, all of these kinds of things that can just add layers to your security. Because the amount of people that just say, oh, they've got to be in our network to access our devices is staggeringly high. It's too high. But if you do put some of these other little things in, you can sort of like increase the security. So I've just noticed that we are basically at 4 o'clock, so my timer was bang on. So we covered what a MAC address was, port security and how to get around it, and some other methods of trying to secure your machines and networks. So if you have any questions, or if either Cosmin or Ryan wants to mention anything else with Sticky Macs or network security in general, you can do, and we are here to ask questions. But if not, feel free to contact us on Discord. We're going to be doing an hour-long talk and conversation about the recent SolarWinds breach, and also about a brand new vulnerability that has been lying dormant for 10 years in basically every Linux machine, that allows you to run commands and remote code execute as just having sudo installed on your box. So, as I say, if you have any questions or any of that, we're going to be over there anyway talking about it. So, feel free to join us. And if you don't want to talk about that stuff, come over and we can talk about help anything that you want. If anyone wants any help installing Linux, you can also ask as well. But if not, thank you very much for coming in. I hope you had a good, relaxing break.